What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Curtain Up podcast. I'm here with Alex Portaro, Amy Tran, Cole Butcher, and our director, Jennifer Price. And this week's topic is going to be shows. Well-known shows, underrated shows, overrated shows, you name it. Um, so we're just going to jump right into the game. It's called Underrated, Overrated. Now, I'm going to say a name of a show, and we're all going to say whether it's underrated or overrated. And
Okay.
if anyone knows anything about Broadway, is that there's plenty of shows that either don't get the recognition they deserve or get recognition when they really shouldn't. um, so yeah, let's just jump right into it. Our first show, we just did it at the Naples Players last summer, Mamma Mia.
Oh.
How do we all feel about that show?
Is there just a rated category? Because
We'll say either underrated, overrated, or it gets the recognition it deserves.
I think it gets the recognition it deserves.
Why do you think that?
It's one of those fun, poppy, bubbly musicals. It makes you feel good going into it and coming out of it, and it gets the right amount of hype, and anybody can do it at any level.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, and I think that the storyline is a little wonky, but there are moments in the story that are so valid, So I mean, being a mom and all of the moments are great, and the music is great, which I think makes it a great show. I don't necessarily love the storyline as a whole. It's kind of, just weird, but
yeah, it's definitely an interesting storyline. 3 dads, 1 mom.
I feel like it's probably fairly rated. I feel like it gets like the right amount of hype. Because again, the music is really good, and I feel like that's like the main driving force of the show, like the main asset to it, just because like it is so fun and it's so catchy. The plot definitely is kind of wacky, as we all know, actually going through the show and trying to figure out character-wise and all that. It's very, very confusing and was really hard to do character work on Sophie. But yeah, I think it's a pretty fairly rated show.
I would agree.
I think so too.
Yeah, I think we all can agree that it definitely gets the recognition it deserves, and it's just a fun show to do. I think everyone here was involved in some way with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, Mamma Mia is just a great show. On to the next one. Wicked. How do we feel about Wicked?
I love Wicked, but I think it's overrated. And if you look at the 2003 Tony Awards, it is proof that show got so overhyped because everybody thought it was going to sweep the Tonys, and then it didn't.
That's very true. Look at the facts of the Tonys.
I believe it's a little overrated. It's not one of my favorites. That's just me personally.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I don't know, because anytime you hear Wicked, it's like that's one of the iconic Broadway shows, and I was like, yes, I love Wicked so much. Like, oh my god, that's one of my top favorites. But I don't know. At the end of the day, it's a good show, but at the end of the day, it's a good show. I don't think it's anything super wow, I would die to go. I would sell my soul to go get a ticket to go see Wicked.
Yeah.
Even though I do love it, it has I feel like it has a very special place on Broadway, and I do really love it, and I saw it on tour. It's a great show. But I do feel especially just in the past couple years, I feel like it's just become really, really common, and so I feel like it's the taddest bit overhyped. Even though it is really good, I feel like it is a little bit overhyped.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of unfortunate. It's like a popular song that gets played too much and then everyone hates it,
Defying Gravity.
Yeah.
That's the
Wow,
quota
I've never
for
heard of
that.
that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I have to agree that it's overhyped. Just because anyone who thinks musical theater that's one of the first shows that'll come to mind for someone who doesn't know a lot of theater but thinks they do. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, Wicked is still a great show, and everyone who performs in it is obviously an amazing actress. Um, the next show, Chicago.
Ooh. You know, I would have to say it depends on the level. I think on Broadway it is super overrated, but when you do it well off of Broadway, I think it can be perfectly rated.
All right, depending on the production, I get that.
Right, because like if you look at Chicago, it's been running on Broadway for how many? What the revival came around in '98, and they're still doing it, and then they just keep bringing in big names to keep enticing people to come back. But you go to a local production like we did, who kind of takes their own spin on it, and it's something spectacular.
I totally agree, and exactly what you said, Cole, is Bryce and Katie and I went to Miami to see the professional production before our local production, and it was not good. It was not good in Miami, and ours was so much better. And it made me really like the show, our production, whereas I was not feeling it before.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely one of those shows where like it is so hard and like just everything, like the dancing, the vocals, the acting, like everything about it is so difficult and like the technical elements, it's just a really hard show to put on. So I feel like when it is, like Cole said, when it is put on, and it is a good production like off Broadway, I think it can be fairly rated. But yeah, I do think it is like a little bit overrated on Broadway, but yeah, it depends on the production.
Like I feel like it's definitely another one of those like iconic shows, like based on its own like style and hype. And like if you hear it on Broadway, it's another one of those like, oh my god, yeah, I know Chicago. Yep, 100%. But like when you put it on like locally and it's like done well, it's like, oh wow, this kind of does hit a little different now.
Yeah, jumping off of Alex's point of the technical elements, Cole, you were the production stage manager for that show. What do you think was the biggest challenge in that show, particularly?
Oh God, everything.
Bell block.
It definitely remains one of the most complicated shows I've ever called to date. I definitely think it was one of the most complicated rehearsal periods too, just because the dancing has to be so precise and everybody kept getting yelled at, chicken wings, chicken wings.
We love Fosse, we really do.
Fosse, that's great.
Do you remember how many cues there were for that?
720
Oh
called cues.
No joke.
But when you put that many cues and that many technical elements into a show like we did, things are bound to go wrong. And that's what made Chicago so interesting, even more so than say Mamma Mia that had 7 fly people on it, because because every single night in Chicago we were problem solving on new things that came up. We never had the same problem repeat twice. It's like, oh, okay, this light's not working, great, we have to go here. Oh, this person's missing, oh great, we have to go here. This set piece is not moving, keep moving.
Yeah, Chicago really was a fun time.
Yeah.
Sounds like it for you especially.
I mean, it was spectacular. It was one of the most fun shows to call once you got in the rhythm of it, and it was one of the most fun shows to watch and experience. And I don't think that there's ever been a crew or a stage management team that knew the dances quite as well as we did.
Yeah, I remember. I think it was during me and my baby, I looked over to the side and just see like the ASMs and the crew just doing it in the wings.
Oh God, talk about an exhausting and a hard number. Me and my baby,
Oh.
Kick turn, kick turn, kick turn.
Remember the one night that I fell and I just like bounced off the floor and got back into it? Oh, I love that show was just so good.
It is. I think my favorite note that I had to give every single night was, Frankie, don't lose your hat.
Yeah, our hats love to fall off in those numbers. All right, next show, Book of Mormon.
Okay.
So I'll start with this one. I personally love the show, and I think it gets its good amount of credit. I think it gets what it deserves just because it's done in a lot of places. It's been on Broadway for um, how many years now? I don't remember, but I personally just love the show. I love the
I
dancing in it, the harmonies, and the story is just funny. It's a great satire.
I agree. I think it's a well rated show just because it's very edgy, but there's so much heart and
Honesty in
positivity
it, yeah.
throughout it. Yeah.
I think it's one of those shows that is pretty fairly rated, but I think what makes it so appealing to so many people is that because it is like, such a huge satire, and that's kind of what it's known for. But I think it's so interesting because it always comes from such a real place, and like those are real things that happen. So I think that's one thing that makes it so appealing, and so hyped, because it always comes from like that real place, which
Yeah.
makes it a lot funnier, I think.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. Shows that just come from a real place, it's just gonna be good.
Yeah, I agree. I love that show, and it's funny. It's true. When you're listening to it, you laugh because it's true. So, even though they're exaggerating things, those they of course exaggerate everything, but
Yeah.
it's funny and the music is good and the dancing is great and it's a good show. I like it.
Yeah,
It's
lots
also
of
super fun
Too.
to watch the audience's reaction, especially if they
Yes.
don't know what it's about.
oh, and the old people get up and leave. Oh, that's the best part.
Yeah.
No, but I agree with Jen. It's definitely exaggerated to a point where it's not too much. It's just right. Like when Elder Price is at the coffee bar and he's drunk in quotes off of coffee because Mormons don't drink coffee, and it's just a little stuff about that show that just makes it great.
Even their personalities are exaggerated, just
Oh,
everything.
oh, so
Yeah.
much. The
Yes.
biggest smiles in the world. Ugh. All right. Next show, the Chicago type show, Cabaret.
I think it is currently underrated. I
I-
think I think back in the day that it definitely got the overrated hype, and I think it definitely got there. But because it's been not really widely produced, maybe at a collegiate, a local level, but I don't think people understand how relevant the story is still today.
Yeah, I have to agree.
Mhm.
I think it's very underrated right now. Like you said, it was overhyped when it first came out, but it's definitely underrated now. And like you said, it's just a beautiful story. Um,
Yeah,
and it
dark and beautiful. It's my favorite kind.
dark, yes, very very dark, and it has a lot of key elements of history, and it has the Holocaust dealing with Germany after World War I. It's
Well, it also, I mean, it takes place in that time frame that we don't really talk about. It's not we
hmm
all talk about World War II and when the Nazis are actually in power, but this
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 is
show is
right
actually touching
before.
on a time period, yeah, when they're rising to power, which is something we don't see, not even like modern movies or anything like that. It's just not talked about.
hmm
I agree. I think it's definitely extremely underrated right now because again, like the story is so like important and is so truthful. And I think the way that the music like moves the story along is so beautiful and just like adds this whole other element to it. So yeah, I think it's definitely underrated.
Yeah, because it's not as talked about. I don't know anymore because like everyone knows that like Cabaret, it's a show that exists, but I feel like as much as people like know it exists, people also like forget about it,
Hmm.
and I just feel like it needs to be brought up a little more. Maybe as often as be more chill nowadays.
Oh, Lord.
yeah.
Yeah. I agree with that one, actually. I don't think there's not a whole lot of musicals that we can choose from at a high school. So obviously this isn't one I ever even think about, but
No.
but I really
High school doing
love this
cabaret.
one.
That would truly be interesting. Oh,
Yes,
wow.
I think I would tell the administration. Um, just suggesting it. But no, I love this show, and I think that once a really good production comes back, that it'll be more popular again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to agree with that opinion. Um, anyway, on to the next show, one that many people now associate to strong musical theater, Hamilton.
Overrated.
I knew that was
Okay.
gonna come from the mouth.
I
I
have
mean,
to say, I saw the original Broadway cast production of this, and I really was truly blown away. It was a great show. I think that it just has the unfortunate effect is that it's so popular that it's become like mainstream and everybody gets sick of hearing it. But
Yeah.
the show itself and the music and just the performance, and it was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen.
All right,
Yeah, I
Cole,
totally agree.
sorry, Alex, go ahead.
I saw it, I think, like 2 years ago on Broadway, and it was fantastic. Like everything was so like seamless, even just like down to their like scene transitions. Like there's a whole set on stage, and then they just like managed to make it disappear in a matter of seconds by way of like the ensemble, and it's such a detailed show, and I personally really like it, but I do agree that it kind of is in that vein of like Wicked, where it is just so like mainstream and really overplayed. So unfortunately, it does kind of like get overhyped, if that makes sense. But I do still really love it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Alex. I think that it has definitely gotten overhyped, and I enjoy the music. I've seen the performances and at the Tonys. I've watched the bootleg. I think that there's something so valuable in it. I think it has redefined what American theater is currently. I think it is ushering in a different generation of shows that we're producing, things that are more historical, things that have a modern twist on it.
Definitely.
I also think, and I very much appreciate what it's doing for younger audiences. You know,
That's
when you
what I was gonna
say,
say. Yes.
"Hey, look, there's this rap R&B musical out there talking about our founding fathers," and it gets kids excited. Hey, awesome! That really hits home for keeping the arts within our culture and making sure it survives to the next generation. Now, like watching the bootleg, you lose a lot of the magic of seeing it live, of course, but listening to the soundtrack, the vocals are amazing, the performances are truly amazing, and it's going to survive. But yeah, Alex, you're totally right that it's going to go by the way of the Wicked, where it's just it's like, oh, this is just a Broadway standard now. Let's see it run for the next 20 years. It's the next
I'm
Phantom.
hoping it inspires more writing, like
Yeah.
people to take stories from history and, write something amazing about it, because that's all he did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, look at Six. Six came
Yes.
Six came out
Mhm.
because
I
Hamilton
Yep.
love
started.
that musical. I know that's not what we're talking about, but I love that one.
Yeah, I have to agree that Hamilton is just gonna inspire more people to take risks in their writing, because even shows like West Side Story, for example, it was a massive risk with the story and the way they were telling it, and I feel like more risks like that need to be taken, especially like the way with Hamilton did, and it was still is extremely successful. Um, and it has that honesty that we were talking about before, and
Yeah.
just
Mhm.
it's a beautiful show. When I went and saw it in San Francisco, you cry at the end of that show when you see it live. You just do.
I cried watching a bootleg.
Yeah, I sobbed at the end of that show. I saw it with Jillian, and we were a mess. Like we were a puddle on the floor. And I'm not someone that usually like really cries that much at like shows or anything. I don't know. They just don't ever like fully get to me that much. But I was a complete mess at the end of that show.
Yeah, I think that show just has an effect on you. I
It
really,
does.
and at the end of the show, I watched Jonathan Groff came out and spoke to the audience and just like about his character. It was amazing. It really was. And maybe the best thing that could happen to, as Cole was saying, bring in newer audiences and audiences that weren't in love with musical theater before, see a different side of it. I'm hoping that's what it will do.
Well, it's the
Yeah, like
exact.
my
It's the.
history professor. Sorry, Cole.
That's okay.
I'm taking American history right now, in like just for my semester, and one of our entire units was kind of wrapped around the musical because he had saw it over at Barbara B. Mann, and he incorporated as much of it as. Now, yes, he did debunk a lot of things that were like historically wrong or whatever and stuff like that. But at the end of it, he still was like, this is definitely it. Like one of our homework assignments was to either watch a bootleg or listen to the soundtrack.
Yeah, when it first came out, I was taking U.S. history in middle school, and I remember my teacher just ended up loving it. And fortunately, I was able to go see it in February, I think, early February, and I went and saw it in San Francisco. And my friend Chris Campbell was in it, and he got to take us like backstage after, and it was a really cool experience. And there's just so much that goes into that show, and yeah, it's just beautiful. Um, On to the next show. Um, Another Lin Manuel Miranda show, In the Heights.
I think it's underrated. I feel like it has gotten overshadowed by Hamilton. Like you think of Lynn, you think, oh, Hamilton. Like that's the first thing that comes to mind. But I think it's a beautifully representative show, and the music is phenomenal. And yeah, I think it's very underrated because it does get overshadowed by Hamilton, which I understand, but yeah, I think it's definitely underrated.
I agree with Alex. I think it
agree.
is completely underrated, especially now. People are looking to diversify theater, and it is one of the most diverse casting pools that you could possibly put up. Which is why I think it scares a lot of people, because there's communities out there that don't have that sort of diversity within them. And so it kind of faded into the background a little bit. And now that Lin-Manuel Miranda is back out front with Hamilton, hopefully In the Heights will kind of feel that revival, pulling on the coattails.
I agree. I love this show, and maybe with the movie coming out too, it'll pull people in. But yeah. I love this show. I love the music.
Yes.
And I agree with Alex too. It just is totally overshadowed. But hopefully, the more people love Hamilton, the more people will, explore
research into it. Yeah.
Yes, the other shows that he's written. So
Yeah.
I love how authentic it is. Like I don't know, this could easily just be me like not knowing what's up, but I feel like there's not a lot of like Latin representation like that through like musicals, and it's just, especially with it, and like on top of that, it's super catchy, super fun, like easy to follow, easy to learn. Even with half of the show being in Spanish, you can still like move through it and like you'll understand the context of everything. I just love the representation of it into the theater.
Yeah, I have to agree that it's just completely underrated, and it has some beautiful messages in it. And unlike Hamilton, it's a modern story that people living in those areas can relate to. And even if you don't live in those areas, you can relate to something in that story, because there's just so many levels in it. It's got love, it's got father-daughter relationships, it has loss. it really is just such a beautiful show, and it's sad to see that it's so underrated and not many theaters venture out and do it because, like Cole said, it's very diverse.
Mm-hmm.
Very. Mm-hmm.
And on to the next show, just completely different turn, falsettos.
Oh, underrated.
I think this show is totally underrated too.
I would agree.
Yes.
I think it's underrated.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. I think again, like the message, and that it does kind of have that like bit of historical feel. Not that it was that long ago, but like the AIDS crisis, and I think that's such an important um, thing to like talk about. And it's often like a very like taboo subject, and I think the musical just tackles it head on, and it does it in such a beautiful way. And the music is fantastic. And yeah, I love that show. It's very, very underrated.
Yeah, I have to agree because even with the recent filming of it with Andrew Rennell, Christian Borle, and Stephanie J. Block, even with their recent recording of it, that got it a little bit more into mainstream, but still, like, if I bring it up to some of my theater friends, they're like, oh, I haven't seen that show. And I'm like, you need to see it because it's another one where you will cry at the end because its story is so powerful and it's really important to recognize that time. Like Alex said, it has that bit of historic value with the AIDS crisis. It's much more than just a musical about a gay man with a wife and kid.
Yeah, and I think it's just very still relative, even though it was meant to be, in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s. It's still very real situations today. So it can apply, and people can still connect with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. Anyone else have any thoughts about it? All right.
Nothing that hasn't been said.
All right, we're going to go on to the next one. One that recently was cut short at the Naples Players because of the pandemic. Bye Bye Birdie.
Oh gosh, if you want to talk about a show that's completely opposite of what the Hamilton craze is, it's Bye Bye Birdie. Well, no, I think this show is overdone but underrated.
All right.
I think it's because people forget that when it premiered, it did for children and teen actors really what Hamilton is doing for a new wave of theater goers. It's something that wasn't seen back in the day. Like, oh my gosh, we're putting a bunch of 15, 16-year-olds on stage and they're carrying the show. Now, the script is not the greatest. It's and if we could just do a concert version, plus it'd be no, and it has to be done right. And I think that there's a lot of missteps within the songs and within the script, but if you play it correctly, it can land.
I think this is the same another situation like Chicago. Like it just totally depends on who's producing it.
Yeah.
The the direction that the directors decide to take the show and how it goes, because I think that the script is not great, but but I think you can take an outdated script and a script that's not great and still put on a really good show. So in that sense, yeah, I agree with Cole. I think that it's totally overdone because like every high school does it.
Yeah.
But I think that it's underrated how good it could be.
Right, and it's hard to do a really good production of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Totally.
but TMP pulled it off, I have to say.
It was so
Yes.
Yeah, it's too bad that it had to get cut short. Anyway, on to the next show. Stephen Sondheim's Company. With its recent revival, its version in 2006, and then its opening in the 90s, or I forget when it opened. It opened, I can't remember. But how do we feel about it?
I think it's currently underrated.
Currently, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think I think it's one of those like back in the day, it definitely had its day in the limelight, but has since faded into the background for it. It's not, and even in its heyday, you go back, people still don't really know what it is. Like you can't ask a modern person on the street, be like, "Hey, name a musical show," and they're gonna be like, "Yeah, no, totally, Company." Even musical theater professionals, they have to dig a little bit to get to that show.
Yeah, I'd have to agree that it's currently underrated and unfortunately, not many people know about it because it does have valuable lessons in it, and just there have been some beautiful productions of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really like this show actually. And we were supposed to be in New York in a couple weeks, and I was really going to try to go see it, but so it's sad because I think this will be a really good revival if they still open. But yeah, I think it's a not very well known show. It's not, if musical theater people maybe, but it's pretty. It's the music is good. The story can be good if it's told well.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of those situations where it depends on the production of it and who's doing it and how they do it.
Yes.
Agreed.
On to the next show, Gypsy. Another Sondheim.
Oh my god.
I love Gypsy.
What year did the Naples Players do it? How long ago was it?
Summer 2014.
2014. Yes. So a few years ago, Miss Price was in this show. Would you like to say the role you played?
Oh, let's see. I was a stripper.
Dream role.
And I was also the swing for all of the other strippers.
Yeah, hashtag Mazeppa.
Yep, and I did go on for Mazeppa for a week of the run. That show has a special place in my heart because both of my girls were in it with me too. Riley was Baby Louise and Grace was the balloon girl. So that was fun. Oh yeah, and that was Dawn's funny idea was since Grace and I look so much alike, she made me the balloon stripper. Like she grew up to be a stripper later. Girl.
Oh, that's
so
great.
that was Dawn's idea. She thought that was funny. And then Cole had fun putting, making the kids blow up the balloons bigger and bigger every night. So I couldn't.
Yep. That was the best.
I really was worried I wasn't going to fit through that door. But no, I do love that show. I think that that the musical numbers that come from it, there's some iconic numbers. I think that the numbers we cut out of it, it was valid to cut some of it.
Have an egg roll, Mr. Goldstone.
Yeah, I know. I knew we cut that because, theaters did it. And Riley spent night after night watching. She's like, "We did that song." I said, "No, we did not." I know we did not.
Anyway, do you think the show in general is underrated or overrated?
I think the story, like the real story of the mother-daughter relationship, part of it is totally underrated. I think people, kind of glance over Gypsy, but if the story's told well, I think it's such a good show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd have to agree.
I'm kind of in that same boat. I think the story itself, I think the history and the truth that it's based off of is underrated. I think the show itself is overrated because it's one of those that, people know the music from, even though they don't know the show. Everybody knows Everything's Coming Up Roses when they're like coming out of the womb. People are singing it. But so I think in that sense, it's overrated and it's overplayed. I don't think people see the fun and the history in it like they used to when, Gypsy Rose Lee was actually alive and a real human being that you interacted with.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, a more contemporary one. The Wedding Singer. Do we think it's underrated, overrated, or does it get the recognition it deserves with its Broadway run?
I feel like it, personally, I think it's kind of underrated. However, it does kind of crawl into that category of like Bye Bye Birdie and stuff where sometimes it can be a little bit like overproduced. But I think it's underrated. I think the music is so fantastic, and like it kind of has that Mamma Mia feel where it's just like such a feel good show, and I feel like it's honestly music that just really everyone can enjoy. And I think the storyline is great. I think the script is hilarious. So I would say underrated.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think you said it the best way that we could. You hit all the points of the music being amazing, the script being amazing. And it's still honest too, and it hits those points home. Um, anyone else has some things to say about it? Cole.
I mean, I think it's well rated. I think it's riding that perfect middle ground. I think there is a really, really nice spot for it in modern culture because the 80s are constantly having a revival and everybody's like, oh my God, I love the 80s fashion. I love the 80s music. I love everything. And this show is sort of that stereotype of the 80s. So people have a fun time going back and being nostalgia about it while rocking their faces off.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. I feel the same. I feel like it's just right. I feel like it just gets the recognition it deserves. I don't feel like I I feel like you come out of it feeling so happy and it's fun and like Cole was saying, everybody remembers the songs from the 80s even if you didn't live in the 80s, everybody knows them. So they're all singing them.
Yeah. We all hit some very valid points with that show, and hopefully this pandemic ends so that the Naples players can do it this summer because it would be amazing.
Yeah.
The next show we're going to talk about is Catch Me If You Can, another TNP show that we did in the past. Personally, I think its Broadway one run was underrated. It didn't really click with audiences, but it has some great points and it has that historic value. It's great storytelling in my opinion, and the music is phenomenal.
Yeah, I love the music. I think like The Wedding Singer, I'm kind of in the same vein as this, but it's because I also did this show. I think it is well rated, but you're right. I think was very underrated when it was on Broadway. I actually still think it's very underrated because you don't see many productions popping up around the country being like, yeah, let's do Catch Me If You Can. And I think it's because the story is just a little like, oh my gosh, we're glorifying this criminal with catchy 60s pop music.
Yeah, there's that aspect to it for sure.
I do love that show though. It's very
yeah, I did too.
It's catchy, the music is great, and I think that it's a hard story to tell, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So it really, you need a very good direction. For sure.
Yeah, I think you need to be able to do it right in order for it to like go well at all. It's just a big show in general. Like everything about it is like a spectacle. Like it's not one of those like, oh, let's just pull this off at our little small high school in the middle of nowhere for our audience to see.
Yeah,
right. You can't ride that exaggerated line that like Hairspray takes place in. Hairspray, let's get these crazy wigs to be as big as they can. Catch Me If You Can focuses on the reality, and you're like, oh my gosh, I have to find these real looking massive wigs and these crazy real dance numbers that have to be done not satirically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's got to be live and live in color.
because
That was
so
really cheesy. I apologize
That
for
was
that.
really bad.
Yeah, you're done.
I have to go now. No, I'm kidding.
uh, yeah, all in all, it's a great show. I think we'll do one more. And does anyone have a show that they want to bring up? Or I'll just pull from the list again.
Go ahead,
Surprise.
surprise
Yeah,
us.
just pull the list. Yeah.
All right, we're gonna pull the list again. One more. Um, let's go with what we just did at Gulf Coast High. Into the Woods.
Overrated.
I love that show. I was psyched that we did it because that's honestly always been a dream show of mine. I mean, as we learned, the music is really difficult.
Yeah.
Music is very difficult, especially with tracks.
Genuinely, I think the hardest musical show I've ever been in, and that's on top of like Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, which was extremely hard. It definitely tops that. That being said, it is very overproduced.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Very.
It's another like high
overproduced.
school show that everyone, like a lot of high schools do, and it's really hard to do, let alone for like high schools across like the nation to do. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's really overproduced because the story is so clean. So like really anyone is technically able to do it, but it is one of those shows that like you can't just kind of throw together. Like it has to come from a real place. And there's also a lot of technical aspects, but it's
Lots of technical aspects in that show.
just make it like this big gimmicky kind of thing, and not make it like real. But it really doesn't have like an effect unless it's like coming from a real place and it's motivated.
Yeah. Like it's definitely not a show that you can just like Alex said, like half put together. It's definitely a hit or a miss. Like if it's not well done, like in the slightest, like it's just not as good. Because you can tell when there's like, oh, that didn't look right. Oh, that didn't sound right. Oh, they definitely that was the song, yes. Like it's definitely one of those
And they
things you
came
have
in
to
a
give
bar
it a
before
look.
they were supposed to. Let's just try to figure it out.
Yikes. But I think something that we've said with every single musical is if it's well done, it can be an enjoyable production. I think that's something all theater artists have to do moving forward is not just look at a script because of its popularity or because it's fun music, but actually find a true story and a heart in it, which is something that I love working with Dawn and Charlie on shows with, because they force themselves to find new meaning in shows, even if it's old like Gypsy or new like Catch Me If You Can. And it's just that's what's pushing us to continually find better and better shows and fall in love with these different shows and be able to have these types of conversations, is because we're finding new meaning in them.
Yeah.
I agree, and as far as Into the Woods goes, I do think it's an overrated show, but I thought it was a show that the kids that we had could do well.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, and I kind of like to take those stories and see if we can make something out of it. It's a little bit of a, okay, yeah, this is kind of an overrated show, but there's so many great songs and characters, and I think I can do better than what it sounds like here.
100%. Like if you've got the talent for it, then then why not?
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. Cole said some really good points just about finding those meanings within shows, and I think any show that, like he said, any show that finds it'll be enjoyable and it will have meaning and it'll intrigue audiences, and I think that's what separates like a good show from a great show, is having that heart and meaning behind it.
Totally.
Because you can have the talent, but if you don't have the story,
No.
it's just a concert.
True.
Honestly, I think we did in our production of Into the Woods. I think we found a good story in it, and I think we did a good job with it.
Oh,
I think
absolutely.
so too.
Yeah, I think that it's, on the one hand, we have those kind of gimmicky characters that we use for comic relief because the second act is so dark and
So
Yeah,
dark.
so the second
so
act
dark.
is just wow, wow.
So we use the princes for comic relief and,
Agony reprise.
yes.
You found your princess, go find another one.
But even in the end, like I remember when Alex and Thomas had that moment at the end, even they had to find like the realness there to make it good, and they did that.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
with our production, that was one of the fun points of the show. At least, like, because not being in it, it was fun to see. Well, and it was interesting to see everyone kind of like go from the beginning where they were like, I do not know what this line means, to like finding the real meaning for like their characters and like how their characters move the story along.
hmm Yeah, it was a real challenge for everybody because, like Jen said, we had the talent, but the hard part was putting the story behind it and putting heart behind it and understanding those lines, not only why you're saying them, but how it affects everything else.
Well, and that comes from growing with the production. It's unfortunate in high school that you only have 4 shows really
hmm
to try to find that. So you imagine sitting down with something like Wicked or Hamilton that's been running for years and years and years now. These actors are constantly finding new things and new discoveries about the character and how they're evolving through the entire process.
Yep.
yeah. And I think it was really cool too to see everyone kind of put their own like spin on it because these are characters that we all know and love. Like we have all heard about like Rapunzel and Jack and the Beanstalk and Little Red. And then putting on top of it that it is so widely produced. I thought it was really, really cool, like watching our cast put their own spin on everything. So that was like really enjoyable. But yeah, also finding the serious moments, which was definitely a challenge, but it was a really good challenge because the serious moments are right in between, like, all of this like filler, like laugh kind of moments. So it was like hard to, get into
Yeah.
those serious moments. But
I was very nervous about doing Act 2 at all, so I was so happy that we could really just make it as good as it was because
Yeah.
that scared me. Act
Yeah.
2 scared me.
A lot of productions of the show, they only do Act 1 of it.
Act 1.
Yes, Charlie begged me to only do Act 1. He's like, this will be great, but how about we just do Act 1? So when he came in to run the music with everyone, he was seriously impressed. He saw you guys had done a ton of work with, and so that's why it ended up so good because you guys really put a lot into it.
Yeah, I think we were all really pleasantly surprised with, especially the music aspect of it without a formal music director.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just a
So
phenomenal show.
overrated show, but can be done well.
hmm Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have. We went on for a while about Into the Woods. There's just a lot to unravel in that show, and I'm sure we didn't touch on every aspect of it, and I'm sure we didn't touch on every aspect of every show, but I certainly had fun. I hope listeners, you had fun listening to us and getting our opinions on all these shows from high-end people like Cole Butcher, who had done stage managing on cruise lines and now does stuff in community theater, and then people in high school like me, Amy, and college students like Amy. Anyway, thank you all for listening, and I'll see you next week with our next episode.